I think I think that the entire framework of gentrification is badly misplaced and based on a lot of really faulty assumptions. Among
Okay.
them, the
So
idea that
just a question.
yeah,
Do you consider yourself a gentrifier?
I think that I am what a lot of people have in mind when they talk about gentrifiers, but
Hmm.
I think the term is virtually meaningless, and I want to explain why that is.
Okay, so
Um,
you live in
I
Sugar
live in
Hill.
West Harlem, Sugar
Hmm.
Hill, which is a historically middle class black neighborhood. There are a few young white people there, mostly a combination of reasons. One is that it is one of the last affordable neighborhoods in Manhattan, and or relatively affordable neighborhoods in Manhattan, and another is that it is between the main Columbia campus and the Columbia Medical Center, which is where my girlfriend studies. She's in a
Hmm.
grad program there, and so I mean, I had always assumed that, like most people I know, if I moved back to New York, I would live in Brooklyn, but that's very far from the Columbia Medical Center, so we end up uptown. But anyway, enough
Hmm.
about me. The point is that gentrification, the whole discourse about it is based, I think, on a number of weird, faulty assumptions, and I think
Okay.
displaced uh, displaced concerns about inequality, both racial inequality and economic inequality, that people have trouble talking about. So they move it into, I think, a very superficial and circular discussion about gentrification. So let me explain what I mean by that. For starters, I mean, it's interesting when you were talking about this neighborhood in Rochester, this notion that, like, oh, there are restaurants there, there's street level retail, like that's the bad thing. That's what we should be concerned about, is that there are thriving small businesses, that people can walk around, that
Well,
there's
it's
things
not
to do.
that's not a
No,
bad thing.
I
That's a
know you're
reason.
not saying that, but I'm saying, like, when people talk about this, they get into a kind of, like, you know, they take things that you would think are innocuous, like, I don't know, a frozen yogurt shop. I don't even like frozen yogurt, but something like that, and they act like it's that's the
A cupcake
a
store.
cupcake. In DC, it's cupcakes. A decent bar selling, PBRs or whatever. That's the nightmare. That's going to ruin the city. And in a sort of an indirect way, it can, because it can, or at least it can appear to, because
But Dave, but a
yeah.
decent bar selling PBR is explicitly like you've already set up kind of a weird contrast because PBR is the hipster beer that is often sold for
It
like one or
is,
two
but
bucks.
yeah, but
And so
well,
what's a decent bar? Like
what's
it's a bar where like young white people will come instead of like
you know what?
alcoholics and like old
Hold on,
drunks
hold
and like
on.
winos are hanging out in the bar.
I reject that set of assumptions in both the neighborhood, in both the typically gentrifying neighborhood I lived in DC, which was Columbia Heights. Look it up. And in Harlem now, the bars that I would go to, which do serve, among other things, PBR or similar beers, actually get a fairly broad cross section of the neighborhood going into them. And the reason for that is that I think this very simplistic narrative that's being created, where neighborhoods are essentially, and I'm using that word very deliberately, essentially poor and black, because all black people are poor and all poor people are black, according to this logic.
Hmm.
Then all the white people, who are all by definition rich, and the only people moving in are white and rich, come in, and whatever they like, even if it happens to be cheap beer in a divey setting or whatever, or an inexpensive sit-down restaurant, and it could be inexpensive, whatever it is they like, is a mortal threat to the neighborhood, because the neighborhood should forever be economically depressed, and it
Right.
shouldn't be a place any white people live. And this, to me, is just, first of all, it's full of, implicitly racist and classist assumptions about all kinds of things, but
Hmm.
that doesn't.
But this kind of thing is often expressed by African Americans who live in a neighborhood where
It
white
is.
people start moving
It's
in.
also often expressed by guilty gentrifiers trying to make it clear that because they worry about these things, they're not like the other gentrifiers. I have
Right.
heard both of those things a lot. But
So it's
but
just a
hold
question.
on. But the reality is this. The reality is this. A still simplistic, but maybe, I think, closer to reality model would be that people with cultural capital, but not necessarily financial capital, move into neighborhoods they can afford to live in, where they might set up a little scene for themselves. This could be starving artists. This could be, entry level recent college grads in in nonprofits or journalism or whatever. It could be people doing freelance gigs. They move into a neighborhood because it's where they can afford to live. They get a bunch of roommates. They hang out there, maybe a couple places open to cater to them. Now, the more conscious among them correctly understand that their mere presence as educated people carrying cultural capital who are predominantly, they're not exclusively white, makes the neighborhood a more attractive target for people who have actual capital, people who come in with real money, people who can buy brand new condos in the neighborhood.
Target in terms of people who would want to live there, or people who want to like build a new condo or something like that, or both?
Well, there is. I don't want to pretend this just happens, organically. Obviously, real estate developers hype these neighborhoods, because they have a redevelopment plan. In a way, the first group of the sort of early wave gentrifiers I'm talking about are enlisted involuntarily as shock troops in the effort to redevelop these neighborhoods. No, I mean, it sounds like a joke, but it's really true. I think you have to be conscious of that. At the same time, it's never totally clear to me how to opt out of that. I mean,